So for the second part of the module, of Module 9, we're looking at disabilities. Now, disabilities was always considered part of medical sociology in the past, until about 15 years ago, when a separate section on disabilities was developed at the American Sociological Association. Pretty interesting when you think about disabilities. And I want you to think about this more in alignment to the chapters on race, gender, sexual orientation, and aging, and the issues of prejudice that come into play and what's been put into place to try to equal the playing field and find out how we have failed so much. So I'm asking you to explore this and see how those issues are addressed, and why sociology considers this an important place to be. Now, in my class room, I have them look all over campus. They actually go out, they explore, they look at the problems, elevator in Pinecrest to reach my offices. They look at the advantages and disadvantages where they can find out information on campus. We can't do that. So for this particular module, you have a PowerPoint, and though you have a PowerPoint for every chapter, whether you use them or not is up to you. In the process, they only help you organize things. But for this particular module section, I do ask you to go back into those PowerPoints, and we'll look at those in a minute. And then you'll have a few videos to look at, 3 of them actually. So let's get started on the PowerPoint. You can tell by the first slide why I consider this so very important. The largest minority. Now, yes, women are the largest minority because they are a majority that's considered a minority by the way they're treated. But otherwise, about 19% of the U.S. population has one disability that affects their daily life. Across the world, 21% of the population has a disability. Now, there's no clear easy way to define disability. There's no universal definition. There's no clear definition, however, for normalcy either. So the accepted standards are to look at intelligence, mental and emotional issues, and physical as far as that goes. So these 4 broad categories exist: physical disability, intellectual disability, cognitive disability, and psychiatric disability. What's physical disability? So physical disability can include visual impairment and hearing impairments. These 2 were the first areas that we see legislation and schools coming into place to help people with that type of impairment. And so we see a whole population that is addressed within that. Along with that is the dual sensory loss, both, in fact, and we add to this mobility impairment and health disorders. So particular things like CP, cerebral palsy, fall in this category. We can think of lots of other physical disabilities that come into place, including loss of limb, spinal cord injuries, all of those involving mobility impairments. So, sorry about that. Looks like you got double slides here, and I will get rid of those. What's the intellectual disabilities? Well, we call this mild mental retardation, moderate mental retardation, and severe mental retardation, and then profound mental retardation. And these are based on the functioning of an adult as well as their ability to perform. And if we can test them at all, we look at IQ ranges of starting at mild mental retardation at about an IQ of 70 and on down. The highest rate of the profound mental retardation, they are also to have a significant level of blindness and deafness oftentimes, and physical disabilities. So they are combined in multiple whammied out there in that process. Cognitive disabilities include traumatic brain injuries, which are on a rise today. Those include things out of severe concussions, but those are especially related to traffic accidents, and falls, all sorts of things. In the past, only 10%, today only 10% die from traumatic brain injury, but about 90% have some cognitive losses. So people like Gabrielle Gifford, the congresswoman who was shot in the head, definitely working traumatic brain injury, still has some cognitive losses. And then there's learning disabilities that fall into this, things like dyslexia, which I have a mild form of, that was diagnosed, but we can also see other learning disabilities that pop up, many different levels of them. And in ways, autism falls into this, but it also falls into psychiatric disabilities. And psychiatric disabilities include mental illness, autism, chemical and substance abuse, which we'll get to more in the next chapter, but more the issues of drugs than the dependency on them. So, why more disabilities than ever before? I've moved this to the regular type of PowerPoint instead of just the slides because they're crossing over a little bit here. We'll see how this goes. But why more disabilities than ever before? More advances in neonatal medicine. We keep babies alive that were previously not a viable births. Very significant there when you think about a child being born less than a pound, and we are able to keep them alive. And we can see that those neonatal issues, those babies born under 3 pounds are much more likely to have disabilities for life. Also, multiple births create this neonatal situation. So as we have fertilization occurring, in vitro fertilization, and we have multiple births in the womb, they're much more likely to have problems. Advances in emergency room medicine and trauma significantly increase the population and the aging population. You already know some of those statistics that over the age of 85, 50% of them have some form of cognitive loss, as well as we see the physical disabilities coming into place. Earlier for women than men, women in their 50s and in men in their late 60s and 70s, but persons with disability also live longer. So children with Down syndrome in the past would usually die by the time they were in their 30s or 40s. Today now lived into aging, and what we find with people with Down syndrome, that after 50 they have similar issues to Alzheimer's related to cognitive losses. And we see the liberalization and the expansion of definitions, no surprise to you. We think about that in schools and more children being diagnosed with ADHD. We also think about more children being diagnosed with autism. We talk about the spectrum and that people with Asperger's are part of that autism spectrum, and more people are diagnosed there than they were in the past. And we have more accurate counting of the population as well. I'm asking you in this to go into this PowerPoint and examine some of the issues related to this. How do we have more disabilities? But the link is to the CDC for you. Now, the social model of disability emphasizes the social forces and the public issues rather than the physical variations and troubles. That's where sociology focuses, on this social model, away from the other model, medical model. And the social model focuses more on this environmental model and the social forces. No surprise to you if you looked at throughout the course some of the issues that we've looked at. We look at that social picture, that living in poverty, the issues of race, the issues of gender. We can see the issues of disability. And there is source of prejudice and discrimination for persons with disabilities. That's what PWD stands for. They are considered an economic threat. They're expensive to treat. We've got to handle their issues. Safety threat, such as with mental health, or those that are considered mentally retarded, are they going to be safe in our neighborhoods? Might they hurt someone else? There's a real ambiguity of what is ascribed to a person with disabilities. In other words, how they see their role and how they can fit, they need to be taken care of. Do they fit that sick role model we talked about in the beginning, in the first section of this module? And you'll find that they don't, because they can't be always seeking to get well, because they may never get any better than they are. And it's part of that whole defining the nature of disability. And there's an overgeneralization of the effect of disability that affects every bit of their life. Is it just a piece? Or if you see a person who's deaf, do you also think that they can't communicate, that they don't have the understanding to reach that population? You see, there's also this belief that comes into place of moral accountability for the cause. In other words, think about the statement, the sins of the father will be visited on the sins of the children and the grandchildren, as we look at the Bible, that there is an accountability. Somebody did something wrong. Was it the mother who drank during her pregnancy, or didn't drink enough vitamin C in the process so that she could avoid spina bifida, or enough folic acid coming into her diet? We often are in the place of blaming the victim. Yeah. Isn't that powerful as we start thinking about even the reasons why women don't earn more money? Because why they don't pick better professions to go in, therefore they don't earn the money. We see this whole cause for accountability, and it's moral accountability for even the management of their disabilities come into place. And there's a lot of prejudice. You haven't done enough to take care of yourself. And there's this inferred emotional consequences of disability. The person can't be stable. And we have this emphasis on beauty and fitness and youth, as you saw within our study, even of media influence and what it is like to be beautiful. And there is a fear of acquiring disabilities from a person. So multiple reasons for prejudice, and this has a strong effect on social relationships. It changes their lifestyles and their relationships. They have issues related to the managing stigma, that social disgrace, and what's in place. And we think of people such as President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He did not let the population see his disability. He wanted to pass as normal in society, so that he didn't gather the level of pity, but also within that process so he could maintain his possibilities. Now, I already mentioned the sick role. You've covered that in the chapter in the book, the role of the sick role, the functional theory in place. The disabled may no longer be able to seek those cures or need to seek a professional help. It's an interesting process as we go there. So many people are made disabled by their environment. Things that are not accessible, things that are not convenient, limited interventions to help with the problems. Have you ever observed any of these? I want you to look around your current environment and see how disabling just your environment can be in the process as you start moving forward. So some conclusions to think about as you think about this piece of disability before you look at some of the videos. This is a limited piece I'm adding to our social problem discussion, very limited. That disability is increasing in the world, and there are a high number of people that are affected by some form of disability. Think about the wars in countries. Think about the soldiers fighting. Think about the people that are affected by those. In some countries, this population is considered a throwaway society, a whole throwaway population. And we have seen that in the past. Clearly in multiple societies, including those of Nazi Germany, that is well documented, that in place. Now, that's pretty important as we start to look at what are the issues here for this disabled population. Where are they valued? In the United States, we have this increasing population of disabled. 19% of our population is considered disabled, and we have more laws to address the issues of the disabled today with the passing of the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, in 1990. In 1992, it went into effect. By 1994, it was totally in effect. And guess what? Today, fewer people with disabilities are working, and families handle the care of the disabled. We worry about this being a high cost to our healthcare system, but the reality of it is families handle the care, and they bear most of the expenses on their own, which is pretty significant as they start looking at care issues that are not covered by insurance. So, an important piece of social movements. As we look at these last two, you'll see how the theorists look at disability as well. So I've asked you to look at disabilities at a deeper level by looking at this PowerPoint and hitting the interactive links on it. But I'd also have a few quick videos for you to see. A talk by Amy Mullins. She is a track star for Special Olympics. You have two talks actually here. As you link into those. There it is. You'll see opportunity versus adversity, as well as just a quick look on her prosthesis. You'll notice these legs here as she's talking, her 12 different pairs of legs. A very, again, short video. It's about 10 minutes on the ADA law. And finally, on a visual image of disability, an interesting presentation that was done a few years ago in Europe as you start to explore this. Note that you have a second discussion board for week 2. And as you go into that, you'll see that you've looked at the PowerPoint, and what do you think? Or do you think that this population has many of the issues of other minorities? Maybe they don't, maybe they do. And how can we improve the situation for people with disabilities? With that, I hope you have a great week.